Trump pushes to end mail-in voting by 2026, sparking legal and political firestorm. Former President Donald Trump has once again thrust himself into the center of America's electoral debate. Over the weekend, Trump announced via Truth Social that he intends to sign an executive order, if re-elected, that would eliminate all mail-in voting by 2026. The plan, which he framed as a step to restore election integrity, would mandate the use of watermarked paper ballots and prohibit the use of electronic voting systems. The proposal comes on the heels of a private meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, further fueling speculation and controversy. Legal scholars, Democrats, and voting rights organizations were quick to denounce the plan, arguing that it is unconstitutional, threatens to disenfranchise millions of Americans, and would undermine confidence in democratic institutions rather than strengthen it. The proposal, watermarked paper, no mail-in ballots. Trump's proposal echoes long-standing themes from his 2020 campaign and presidency, where he frequently cast doubt on the legitimacy of mail-in ballots despite no evidence of widespread voter fraud. His plan would phase out mail-in voting entirely by 2026, replacing it with a strictly in-person system reliant on government-issued watermarked paper ballots. In his Truth Social post, Trump argued that mail-in voting is rife with fraud, abuse, and corruption, and that only a return to traditional, paper-based systems can secure American elections. He described electronic voting machines as untrustworthy and easily manipulated. But experts across the political spectrum quickly pushed back, noting that decades of studies and investigations have found no significant evidence of systemic fraud in U.S. elections. Even Trump's own Department of Homeland Security and Justice Department in 2020 declared the presidential election to be the most secure in American history. Legal questions and constitutional concerns. Perhaps the most striking criticism of Trump's proposal centers on whether a president even has the authority to make such sweeping changes to the electoral process. Under the U.S. Constitution, states have primary authority over election administration. While Congress can regulate certain aspects, no president has the unilateral power to ban a form of voting nationwide. This proposal is blatantly unconstitutional, said constitutional law professor Lawrence Tribe. The president does not have the authority to dictate how states conduct their elections, much less eliminate a form of voting used by millions of Americans. Civil rights groups also warned that removing mail-in voting would disproportionately harm seniors, people with disabilities, rural voters, and members of the military who rely on absentee ballots to cast their votes. Roughly 1 in 4 voters used mail-in or absentee ballots in 2020, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Eliminating mail-in voting would silence the voices of millions of Americans who cannot simply show up at a polling place on Election Day, said Kristen Clark, president of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Political reactions. A familiar divide. Democrats responded swiftly, framing Trump's proposal as a direct attack on democracy. President Joe Biden's campaign released a statement calling the plan another dangerous attempt to undermine free and fair elections, while Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said it was straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Republicans, however, were more divided. Some echoed Trump's claims about election security, arguing that tighter restrictions are needed to restore public trust. Others worried that alienating mail-in voters could backfire politically, particularly given that Republican voters in states like Florida and Arizona have historically used absentee ballots at high rates. Election strategists note that Trump's fixation on mail-in voting may also harm GOP turnout. In 2020, Republican efforts to dissuade mail-in voting led to Democrats vastly outnumbering Republicans in early and absentee ballots, a trend that may have cost Trump critical votes in swing states. The Putin meeting and international criticism. Trump's announcement also drew attention because it came shortly after a closed-door meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Although details of the meeting remain vague, critics pointed out the troubling optics of Trump proposing dramatic changes to America's democratic process immediately after consulting with a leader widely accused of interfering in U.S. elections. This is exactly the kind of chaos that Putin wants to see in the United States, said Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat, California. Trump is playing right into his hands. European allies also expressed concern. A spokesperson for the European Union said that free access to voting, including by mail, is considered a democratic safeguard in most advanced nations. What comes next? While Trump's proposal may energize parts of his political base, its legal viability is virtually non-existent. Any attempt to enforce such an executive order would almost certainly be struck down by the courts. Election law experts suggest the announcement is more about political messaging than policy. Still, The move raises important questions about the future of voting in the United States. Debates over voter access, election security, and federal versus state authority will continue to shape the 2024 campaign and beyond. For voters, the stakes are enormous. Eliminating mail-in voting could change the way tens of millions of Americans participate in elections, forcing a shift to in-person voting that may not be feasible for many. As the nation braces for another contentious election cycle, Trump's announcement serves as a stark reminder: the fight over how Americans vote is far from settled.